MMOs have been around for almost as long as the internet has been a thing. From early text-based games to the first three MMORPGs like Meridian 59 and Everquest, the history of the genre now spans decades. MMO players have been waiting for the next big thing ever since the release of World of Warcraft back in 2004, and by the looks of it, that next big thing might never come. So instead of looking to the future for your next big MMO experience, why not look to the past? In this list, we have gathered our favorite old-school titles that still have a healthy population and great gameplay in 2025, along with a few new titles that we are sure old-school players will enjoy. We're kicking off the list with a game that isn't really an old-school MMO, but it certainly would have been a classic if it was released 20 years ago, and it still might turn out to be a classic years from now. Pantheon was finally released in early access in 2024, after years in development that was plagued by numerous setbacks. The biggest being the passing of studio head and legendary game designer Brad McQuaid in 2019. Feedback to the early access has been very positive, and many old-school MMO players are now calling Pantheon their new home. The only reason Pantheon isn't higher on this particular list is because it isn't an old game. We do, however, strongly recommend that fans of classic MMOs check this one out. Next on the list is Vanguard, and there are many similarities between Pantheon and Vanguard as they are both the brainchild of Brad McQuaid. It was released in 2007, but due to a rough release with many bugs, it never had much mainstream success. Vanguard eventually turned into a good MMO, but it was too late and it was shut down in 2014. A Vanguard emulator has later been developed by members of the community, and it is well worth checking out if only to get a peek at this relatively unknown piece of MMO history. Tibia was originally released in 1997 and is still running to this day, making it one of the oldest running MMOs out there. Tibia offers a sandbox experience with a focus on exploration, player interaction, and a player-driven economy. The game's lack of hand-holding and challenging mechanics have created a dedicated community over the years. In 2025, Tibia remains active with regular updates adding new quests, monsters, and areas while maintaining its classic feel. The game features some pretty dated isometric graphics that might make it hard for new players to get into the game, but the gameplay has definitely stood the test of time. Next is Anarchy Online, which was developed by Funcom, the Norwegian company behind games like Age of Conan, Conan Exiles, and The Secret World. AO came out in 2001 and was one of the few classic MMOs set in a sci-fi setting. In 2025, Anarchy Online continues to maintain a small but dedicated player base. While the game has seen fewer updates in recent years, its servers remain active, and its community keeps the spirit of the game alive. Asheron's Call is a true classic. It was developed by Turbine and released in 1999, making it one of the oldest 3D MMORPGs. Sadly, the official servers closed down in 2017. Asheron's Call is set in the fantasy world of Oberon. The game introduced features like monthly content updates, a skill-based progression system, and a seamless world that set it apart from its peers. An Asheron's Call emulator has been developed by fans of the game, so you can still play it today. Lineage II was one of the early big MMOs to come out of Korea and boasted a huge number of players during its first few years. The game emphasizes guild warfare, territorial control, and player-driven conflict, creating a dynamic and very competitive environment. The player base has definitely dwindled over the years, but in 2011 the game switched to a free-to-play model, so if you've ever been curious about trying Lineage II, you can give it a try without much risk. If you want a more modern experience, Throne and Liberty is built on the core foundation of Lineage II and works as a spiritual successor. Wurm Online is an MMO set in a medieval world that was released in 2006. The game prides itself on being the true sandbox MMORPG and was developed by Marcus Notch Persson, the man behind Minecraft. Wurm Online, like Minecraft, also features a world that players can interact with and shape in their image. But Wurm Online is often critiqued for being too complex and with too many systems. If you are looking for a great sandbox MMO, and don't mind spending some time learning the ropes, Wurm Online might be the old school MMO for you. Dungeons & Dragons Online was released in 2006 and is based on the popular tabletop RPG. The game features many of the same elements as the tabletop game, including complex character customization, quests, and loads of dungeon crawling. At first, only the Eberron campaign setting was available to explore, but has since been expanded to the much more popular Forgotten Realms as well, known to players of most of the other D&D-based video games. The title still has almost 50,000 active players and is well worth a try for both casual players that just want a quick adventure and players who enjoy crafting complex character builds. WoW Classic was released in 2019 and is a MMO set in the world of Azeroth. The game is a re-release of the original World of Warcraft, which was released in 2004. WoW Classic features all of the same content as the original game. However, the game has been updated to modern standards, making it more accessible to new players. In 2021, the Burning Crusade Classic was released, allowing players to experience WoW's first expansion in all its glory. And in 2022, WoW fans got Wrath of the Lich King Classic, one of the game's most beloved expansions to date. Let's not talk about Cataclysm Classic. Another fan favorite, LOTRO, was released in 2007 by Turbine. LOTRO, or Lord of the Rings Online, is set in J.R.R. Tolkien's beloved Middle-earth. The game is set at the same time as the Fellowship is traveling towards Mordor, and as you level up you visit many familiar locations and meet all sorts of characters from the books and movies. It still has a very healthy population, and Turbine regularly releases new expansions for LOTRO. In 2022, the game went through a bit of a revival and had a surge of new players joining the game and old veterans returning. EVE Online was released in 2003 and is set in a science fiction world. In EVE Online, there is no set objectives and players are free to do whatever they want. There are many player-run organizations, and the game has a complex economy. The game universe is vast with loads of systems and activities to get involved in, like mining in space, piracy, and trade. EVE Online has also seen some of the biggest and most expensive battles in MMO history between players, which has resulted in hundreds of thousands of dollars in real losses. City of Heroes was a groundbreaking MMO that allowed players to create and customize their superheroes or villains in a vibrant comic book-inspired universe. Despite its closure in 2012, the game has seen a resurgence through community-driven emulator projects such as Homecoming, which have revitalized the game for old and new players alike. These projects have not only preserved the original experience, but also introduced new content and updates, keeping the spirit of City of Heroes alive. Everquest 2, the successor to the iconic Everquest, offers the same richly detailed world with deep lore in a slightly newer package. Building on the legacy of its predecessor, EQ2 provides a multitude of expansions and content updates that have significantly evolved the game. The Origin server is EQ2's classic server, which lets players travel back to the Shattered Lands as it was in 2006 with a few changes. The first expansion, Desert of Flames, will be released later this year. The second expansion, Kingdom of Sky, will also be released on the server, but not much info has been released yet on how far the server will go in terms of content. Almost a decade before Final Fantasy XIV came out, Final Fantasy XI was released in 2003 as the first Final Fantasy MMO. Set in the fantasy realm of Vana'diel, the game combines traditional RPG elements with MMO mechanics. The job system in Final Fantasy XI is one of its most defining features, offering players a high degree of flexibility and customization. Players can choose from over 20 unique jobs, such as Warrior, White Mage, Black Mage, Thief, and Samurai, each with distinct abilities and roles in combat. What makes the system stand out is the ability to switch between jobs on a single character, allowing players to experiment with different playstyles without needing to create multiple characters. Despite its age, Final Fantasy XI still maintains a healthy population and is regularly updated with new content. A visual overhaul of the graphics is also in the works according to the developers. Guild Wars 2 has long since surpassed the first Guild Wars in popularity, but the original is still going. Guild Wars was the first MMO without a subscription model, so by buying the game you get to experience everything it has to offer. No more expansions are being developed for Guild Wars, but there are still events hosted in the game and it still has a big enough population so that you can find people to play with. Maybe the best thing about Guild Wars is that it plays very well as a single-player RPG as well, so it's great for solo adventurers. Dark Age of Camelot was released in 2001 and is an MMO set in the world of Arthurian legend. Players can choose to play as one of three factions, Midgard, Avalon, or Hibernia. The game is unique in that it has a focus on player versus player combat, with large-scale battles taking place between the factions. DAOC quickly became a household name in the MMORPG world, mostly because of its engaging PvP and realm vs. realm combat, which featured PvP on a much larger scale than had been seen before. The only game on the list with the actual words "Old School" in the title. RuneScape was first released in 2001 and is one of the most popular MMOs of all time. The game has undergone many changes over the years, but the core gameplay remains the same. Players can explore the vast world of Gielinor, complete quests, and fight monsters. OSRS was released in 2013, but the reason it's called Old School is that it's running on a version of the game from 2007. OSRS is now more popular than RuneScape 3, and even has a mobile version. The one thing that usually puts off new players from joining the fun is the dated graphics, but if you can look past it or even enjoy it, then the gameplay aspects of OSRS more than make up for it. Star Wars Galaxies is widely considered to be one of the best sandbox MMOs. Originally released in 2003, the game still has a pretty big following. Star Wars Galaxies is known for its player-driven economy, open-ended gameplay, and deep role-playing systems. The game allowed players to live out their Star Wars fantasies in unique ways, from becoming a bounty hunter to crafting starships or even building and managing entire player cities. SWG was shut down in 2011 before the release of Star Wars: The Old Republic, but you can still play the game on the SWG Legends emulated server, which even still releases new content to the game. A true pioneer in the MMO space, Ultima Online is an isometric MMO produced by the legendary game developer and astronaut Richard Lord British Garriott, and designed by Raf Koster, who also helped design Star Wars Galaxies and Everquest 2. First released in 1997, Ultima Online is one of the oldest MMOs on this list. What it lacks in graphics, it makes up for in gameplay. Ultima Online is a sandbox MMO, which means that there are no set objectives and players are free to do whatever they want. There are also many player-run events and organizations, which gives the game a sense of community. In 2025, there are several different official and private servers that cater to different playstyles. Everquest is set in the fantasy world of Norrath and has a vast array of content to keep players occupied. The game also has a rich history, with many players have been playing the game for over 20 years. You can still play the live version of Everquest, or for a more old-school approach, you can head over to the private server Project 1999 and experience the game as it was back in the day. Both versions have decent populations still going, and you shouldn't have a problem finding people to play with. In 2024, the private server Project Quarm was released, which is a true box Planes of Power era server, catering to the fans of the game who prefer a slightly more modern version of the game with a few more expansions to explore than the typical classic experience. We'll end the list with a bonus game which isn't technically an old-school MMO, but does its very best to imitate one. Monsters and Memories is another EverQuest-like that is currently in development being made by Niche World Cult, a group of former EverQuest developers and community members. As the name of the developer implies, this is a niche game that has been heavily inspired by EverQuest on everything from graphics, spell effects, the UI and lore. The game will launch into early access in 2026, but the developers share a lot of gameplay footage on the official YouTube channel if you are interested in getting an early peek at the game. That was it for our list of old-school MMOs that are still worth giving a shot in 2025. If you have any questions or suggestions for the list, let us know in the comments.